Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. This is the weekend edition. We've got a very special show for you today. Today's show is a live talk that I gave in Dallas at the Real Estate Guys Secrets of Successful Syndication. Today's talk is a case study of a very specific project that we completed this year, and it's going to, I think, be very interesting for you, for those of you who are interested in delivering a product of any kind. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about flipping a single-family home, repositioning an apartment building, or performing ground-up construction on a brand new project. It's all viewed through the lens of product design. Enjoy today's presentation. A couple of you have asked why I'm wearing a second microphone here. I have this little handy digital recorder in my pocket, and when you produce a daily podcast, that means producing content every few hours. So if I do a good job, this will be a podcast episode, and if not, you'll not hear about it again. We're going to be talking a little bit about assisted living. This is a case study of a project that we built over the last couple of years, and it's just opening now this year. And I want to position it by first talking about what is assisted living, because it fits within a spectrum of different classes of senior housing. At one end of the spectrum, at the high end, both in terms of cost and service, you have skilled nursing. And that's an area that right now is under a lot of scrutiny industry-wide for a lot of very good reasons, especially the for-profit model for skilled nursing. And you'll see in a moment when we get into it why there are problems, systemic problems in senior housing. And at the other end of the spectrum is independent living. Assisted living is a relatively new asset class that kind of aims to fill the gap between skilled nursing and independent living. And it's based on the 6 or so basic functions. Can you feed yourself? Can you clothe yourself? Can you take your medicines? Can you use the bathroom, bathe yourself? All of those sorts of things. And depending on how many of those you can do on your own determines whether you're a candidate for a particular class of senior housing or not. And that's how that's determined. It really starts with having the right team, and it starts with the operator. This is a service business that is at the very core of it a service business that happens to have a real estate component. That's my partner Lo, my wife Natasha, and a whole host of other folks that are part of the core team. Dave Zook is part of the general partner group. It really starts with having the right team. Now, we decided that we were going to focus on a different class of senior housing. When we talk about senior housing, assisted living, the most common product out there is the big box. I call it a hospital with a better paint job. And this is where you see a lot of the systemic problems. It's all about scale. It's all about getting economies of scale, maximizing profit. And this is where you get the caregiver ratios of 16-1 during the day and 32-1 at night. If you're that one caregiver and 3 people need to use the bathroom at the same time, someone's waiting a long time. And so the caregiver ratios are dramatically important. People get lured into this kind of senior housing with the chandeliers, with the underwater treadmills, all of these things, the pottery classes. Well, I'm sorry, that's not why they're there. They're there for a very specific reason, and if you don't do a good job of the fundamentals, the rest, that's icing on a mud pie. Now, senior housing is, in most markets, overbuilt. Probably the most overbuilt market in the country right now is San Antonio, Texas. Dallas is overbuilt. Many, many primary markets are overbuilt. Many of the secondary and tertiary markets are underserviced. We went into Lake Charles, Louisiana, because this is a fast-growing community, has a massive petrochemical growth story associated with it. And I'm talking tens and tens of billions of dollars of infrastructure investment in liquefied natural gas plants and petrochemical plants and all kinds of stuff. So it's a growing community, one of the fastest growing communities in the nation, and that's why we're there in that market. Back to that supply-demand story that I talked about in my earlier talk. We're all about boutique assisted living. If mom or dad lived in a house, a 1-story or 2-story single-family home, they don't want to go into a box on the 6th floor. It's just not a natural place for them to be. So these are all single-story buildings, and we build a campus of single-story buildings that are small, boutique. You want the intimacy of a single-family home because that's what people are used to. Now, the problem with doing that, of course, is that the economies of scale don't work. So how do you achieve a best of breed where you get the economies of scale at the same time as creating the intimacy, the personal touch, and the personal service of a boutique product, it's by building a campus of these smaller homes. And that's what we've done. I take a perspective of product design. I'm a product designer at heart. And whatever you're doing in business, you're designing a product for a specific customer. So we're going to talk most of today about product design. We're not going to talk about the mechanics of syndicating the deals or any of that sort of stuff, but I want you to take a little bit of the mindset of being a product designer and apply this thinking to whatever it is that you're working on. And then we'll talk a little bit at the very end about syndication. This is the finished product. It's lovely looking campus, brand new construction, and these buildings are purpose designed, purpose built, not just from an aesthetic perspective, but from a functional perspective to do what the buildings need to do. Now, when we talk about product, we're not really talking about the product. We're talking about the product of the product. I'm going to wrap your mind around this. If you go to the hardware store and you buy a drill, what are you buying? Just shout it out. Something to drill a hole. A tool? Yeah. What else? You're buying the hole. Exactly. So the product of the product is the hole. And you can talk about what that drill can do. You say, well, now this is the $400 hammer drill and it goes through 8 inches of concrete like butter. Okay, great. But what you're buying is a hole. If I go to Macy's and I spend $2,000 on an Armani suit, what am I buying? Am I buying shelter from the elements? Well, maybe. But I can get that at Walmart. I'm buying the way that suit makes me feel. It's the product of the product. And that's what you always want to focus on, is when you understand who your end customer is, what is the product of the product that they are after that's going to speak to them directly, and it's usually experiential. Our differentiators come down to 3 things: better food, better care, and better communication. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first 2. I'm not going to talk about the last, just in the interest of time. Better care comes down to a few things. Getting the right staff. This business is all about staffing, staffing, and staffing. Those are your top 3 issues. Getting the right quality people. Now, people that go into this business generally do so because they like to help. They are naturally caregivers, they're naturally servants at their very core. But then they go into the big box facility, and after a few years, that's beat out of them. Because when you're running all night long, when you've got 32 beds to serve, believe me, after not that long, it's beat out of you. So this gives them an opportunity to come back to their roots in terms of what's important to them and is their real natural calling. So we get people that have not only that at their very heart, but also people that have a degree of initiative. So daily exercise classes. You want your customer, our client, to feel that we care. So care has a physical component to it, but there's also a feeling component to it. In a big box facility, it would be unthinkable for a caregiver to sit down and watch a TV show with one of the residents holding their hand. But we can do that. So it really comes down to getting that part right. Our caregiver ratios are 5.3 to 1, absolutely unheard of in a big box facility. At nighttime, we're more like 15 to 1, but again, we're half the ratio of what it is in a big box facility. So it's the focus on why they're there, what are you delivering as the end product. You show that you care. You create those Instagram moments. This gentleman here, a Vietnam veteran, when someone shows up, we take the picture, we send it to the family. If the family's not there, or if the family's there, we take a picture with the family, and we send pictures home regularly. We often get family members coming in, having dinner with mom or dad. And it's like Thanksgiving night, every night. Or sometimes it's more like a kitchen party. We hold pajama days. Like, why not? You want folks to feel cared for, and you can do that in the design of the space. Put up your hand if you think really great design has to cost more. It doesn't. It just needs to be thought through. Design is about thinking through form, function, aesthetic, all of those various elements, and making sure that all of those constraints come together to some kind of optimum point. No different than if you were designing the next iPhone. It's getting all of those conflicting constraints together. And it doesn't matter whether you're rehabbing a house, designing an assisted living facility, it's thinking through that end process. We designed these buildings, it's kind of like a letter H. Think of it that way, where you've got a common area at the core of the building, and then 4 pods with bedrooms. And the idea here was to create 4 pods where the hallways would be relatively short. You get long hallways, that's disorienting. We use color so that people know where they're oriented in the buildings. That's particularly important for memory care. The nurses' station is right adjacent to the common area, so from the nurses' station, if they happen to be in that office versus being in the common area itself, they have direct line of sight, so they can see anyone in the common area. The CDC did a study back in 2017, and they showed that the incidence of slip and fall injuries in boutique assisted living was running at 50% of what it was in big box facilities. That's a big deal. So if you have the opportunity to see someone is doing something that's unsafe, you have the opportunity to intervene as a caregiver and prevent that slip and fall from happening. Better food. This is shocking. How much do you think big box facilities spend per day on food per resident? Just shout out some numbers. $20? Anyone else? $6? You're right on, $6. That's a shocking number. And it's all in service of trying to squeeze out a few dollars more profit. But if your mission is better care, better food, better communication, you're not going to spend $6. You don't have to spend a lot more than $6, but again, you have to think it through. And by the way, these are not stock photographs. These are real photographs taken in the last 45 days from our facilities. You know, wrapped asparagus, puff pastries. I mean, these are plated like you would find in at least a 4-star restaurant. Whereas in a big box facility, it's served cafeteria style on steamer trays. They are unable, even if they knew what we're doing, they would be unable to replicate this experience because they're just not set up for it. When we have the opportunity to take a family on a tour, we almost always get the business. Almost all of our clients don't come to us because there was necessarily an event that's now they need to go into assisted living. Overwhelmingly, they were already in assisted living in a big box facility and they hated it. So they're coming to us because there's already a problem. They've already had that event. They're in a bad spot. They're not getting the care that they need. And when the families come to us, they understand the value. And what I'm going to say here applies almost universally. When the value is unclear, the discussion always degenerates to price. When the value is unclear, always degenerates to price. But when they come here, they say, oh, that's where I want mom or dad. All right, let's talk a little bit about the syndication. This was a project, it's an 80-bed facility. Right now it's 5 16-bed homes. We have the ability to expand to 128 beds once we fill up. The equity investment was $4.7 million. We took in about $9.8 in debt for a total of $14.5. Reasonable ratios. What I'm showing you here on this particular slide is the distribution of investors. We have a total of 47 investors in that $4.7 million. So you might think, all right, therefore your minimum investment was $100,000. We have a handful, 15 of the total investors came in below $100,000. We had, I think, 25 or 27 at $100,000, a handful at the 200 to 300, and then one investor at $700,000. So you can get a sense for the distribution. And it's like both Robert and Russ have said earlier today, be very careful where you set your investment minimum, because that will often drive the number of investors that you're going to get. And a lot of folks will come in, especially if you don't have a track record with them, at the investment minimum. We had a number of surprises along the way. The world of development, not just development, real estate projects in general. If someone tells you everything happens perfectly, they're not telling you the truth. They're not being forthright with you. It's wet in Louisiana. We had to spend $100,000 in lime just to stabilize the soil so we could build foundations. We dealt with 2 hurricanes 6 weeks apart last year. We had so many surprises. The Department of Health said we need to put in a 700-gallon grease trap for every kitchen because now they're classifying it as a commercial kitchen. We're going, it's one sink. Are you kidding me? We eventually negotiated something better. But in the end, we ended up having to spend a lot of extra money that we didn't anticipate. And then last week, we just got Building 2 licensed in the campus on Friday, just before Labor Day weekend. And then on Labor Day Monday, Building 2 got struck by lightning and caught fire. Tore a hole in the roof, singed all of the ducting inside the attic cavity, took out 2 air conditioners, 3 refrigerators, the fire panel and the nurse call system in that building, and then the fire panel and the nurse call system in 2 neighboring buildings. Fire department took 3.5 minutes to respond, so that was kind of cool. And I don't want to leave this on a downer, because it's not a downer. We're well insured and we'll be back online. The damage is not very severe. We happen to have a construction team on site very close by. So this is just part of the flow of being a real estate owner. And this is security camera footage. I was stalking what was going on this morning. They were prepping for breakfast. Folks, when they're coming to breakfast, they want to sit at the kitchen. They want to sit at the island. They want to be part of the heart of the action. And the testimonials that we get from our residents is just mind-blowing. I mean, I get emotional when I read these things. It's just unbelievable. So none of this, except for maybe the lightning strike, none of this happens by accident. It's the result of careful thought and careful product design. And when you do that, then you're going to get the top dollar that you're looking for. We're getting $6,500 a month per bed. The folks that are doing caregiver ratio 32:1, they're not getting that kind of dollar because they can't deliver the service. So that's it for me.
Have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.